Welcome. Welcome to the Ministry Forum podcast, coming to you from the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College, where we connect, encourage, and resource ministry leaders all across Canada as they seek to thrive in their passion to share the gospel. I am your host, the Reverend John Borthwick, Director of the Center and Curator of all that is ministryforum.ca. I absolutely love that I get to do what I get to do, and most of all, that I get to share it all with all of you. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to give us a listen, whether you're a seasoned ministry leader or just beginning your journey. This podcast is made with you in mind. Well, we have some special guests this week on the Ministry Forum podcast. We are delighted to celebrate the work and witness of the Center for Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry as they celebrate their 30th anniversary. Did you know that the center opened way back in 1995 when I was just a wee student at Knox College? I don't want to take anything away from our guests, and in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and share about the center's milestones and what's next. So welcome, everybody. I'm so pleased that you could join me for a conversation today on the Ministry Forum podcast. I wonder if each of you could just introduce yourself very briefly and share a little bit about your connection with the Center for Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry. And I wonder if we could start first with Dong Ha.
Well, thank you for having me on this podcast, John. By way of introduction, my name is Dong Ha Kim. I am currently a minister of Word and Sacrament at Knox Presbyterian Church in Woodstock, Ontario. So that's my main thing. But I'm also privileged to be the director of the Center for Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry at the moment. So wearing those two hats, I'm very thrilled to be on this recording at the moment.
Thanks so much, Dong Ha. And it was great. We went to school together for a little bit.
Yeah.
We overlapped a little bit, for sure. Mary, I wonder if you could introduce yourself.
I think I'm the youngest graduate from the school among us. I only graduated in 2019. I do look aged because I am aged, okay? But now I'm serving as an associate minister at the used to be called Chinese Presbyterian Church, just down the street from Knox College. But now it's renamed as Cornerstone Presbyterian Church, because we want to open our church to a more multicultural community around us. So yeah, I'm very honored because Professor Dong Ha, he was my professor while I was studying there. He invited me to come on board, and I learned so much about, the center through him and others.
Wonderful, Mary. Great to have you with us. And Su Jin.
I'm a graduate of Knox, I think 2004, and I joined the Asian Center because of Reverend Inky Kim, who is my senior pastor at St. Timothy in Etobicoke. And I became the chair. I cannot remember. Sorry, I can't. So around 2011 or 12, I became the chair, and by the grace of God and the help of our committee members, I was able to went through COVID and hiring new director, and then we are here now celebrating 30th anniversary. So it is by all God's grace.
Thank you, Su Jin. And Irene?
Hi, John. And I'm Irene Wee, and I attended Knox College, actually only for a short time, but it was a significant time in 2012. And I got to know about the how Knox functions, and that there was a significant Asian Canadian presence as well at the college. Around 2014 or 15, I was approached by one of the founders of the Asian Canadian Center for Theology and Ministry, Dr. Stephanie Ling, and I joined the council, and it's been a great privilege be part of this council.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you've been able to join us as well, Irene. And Dr. Stephanie Ling, we'd hoped that we could have her on our podcast today, but scheduling just didn't work out for her. But she's left us a reflection on her experience with the Asian Center, and we're going to include that in our show notes that you can find at our Ministry Forum website. Well, let's hear a little more about the founding of the center. What is the story of the center's founding? What was the driving force that led to its creation? I'll leave it up to you all who would like to sort of share that story with us.
Donga will know too. I mean, when I attended Knox College, Donga was a TA. So our history went back to that. But anyway, as you may know that in 1990s, a lot of Korean immigrant churches established, and they are relatively doing well, booming. So a lot of church members and a lot of Korean students studying MDiv at Knox College, and something like even 1 year graduating 20 people, Korean kind of connection related ethnicity. So that was the heyday, so to speak. And Inki Kim and Peter Han, they felt the need that bridging the Knox College and the local Asian communities and Asian churches, they need to do something about this phenomenon. So that was the beginning of this Asian Center. So with the help of Van Cedars, that our beloved Van Cedars principal, and also as after that, a few years later, I think Professor Nansen Song, her dedication and her leadership. So the center was able to host so many things and reach out to Asian churches and Asian background kind of students. So it was really vibrant at the time, like 1990s to 2000 until 2010-ish. So that's my memory.
So Sujin is absolutely right. It was a period of time in which there was a bit of a boom in immigration pattern, and of course, a lot of Koreans and other Asian immigrants were Christians in that sense, and the churches grew in leaps and bounds at that time. And at the time, I think there was certainly a need for training church leaders appropriately. And someone had the vision, obviously a number of people had the vision that Knox College could facilitate theological training of Christian leaders amongst the Asian Canadian immigrant churches. So there was that vision. And, I think there was a lot of trepidation as to how to go about, because Principal Arfed Cedar, the principal at the time, was said to have said, we're not exactly sure what we're starting here. And we're opening a can of worms of some sort, and yet we trust in the Spirit's leading that we go forth with this. And one of the guest speakers also added that, it's a tremendous event that institutions like Knox College is taking this venture, because, at the time, a lot of the institutions were not doing that. And so to facilitate a cultural component of faith training was something, what did he say? He said he had hoped that the center and the work of the college in conjunction with the center could be a quote unquote, a creative instrument of God to help many live in confidence and hope. So and so that I can't put it any better that, the Asian Center, in collaboration with Knox College, becoming a creative instrument of God. And I think, so that set the tone for things to come. And here we are, with great many people coming along, and 30 years later, we're about to celebrate the journeys we have taken.
That's amazing, Dong Ha, for sure. Anyone want to add anything else to the mix? Or
I'm just appreciative of the great vision that went behind, and the courage and the commitment that went behind the establishment of the center. Because, first of all, the the Presbyterian Church in Toronto in particular was very much instrumental as God's instrument to reach out to the Korean people. And consequently, the Koreans came to Christ, and the Presbyterians became particularly a spiritual force and light in Korea. And so the establishment of the center was, in a way, a bringing back of, it was an outpouring of gratitude as well to benefit the ones who had gone out and brought so much in the way of blessing. That's the first instance that I saw. Secondly, the issue of Canadian Asian theology. You see, ethnicity and culture brings a different way of interpreting and applying the scriptures, the gospel. And there is a richness to that benefits the Canadian church to have that Asian component, which is very much application oriented rather than philosophical. So that aspect of it is something that is huge, because in a period of the last decades where the Canadian church was certainly numerically declining, we found that the ethnic churches, the Asian churches in particular, have been thriving, have been very missional and very sending out. So to have this center, in a way, brought back a new vibrancy to Canada. And lastly, professors like Professor Song, for instance, were beginning to be particularly concerned about the second generation, the younger generation, Asians from Christian homes that would go off to university and begin to stumble in their faith, because they also had to cope with cultural adaptation, a change from their parents to them, and of course, a whole set of philosophies and, who is God to them, all those kinds of questions coming out. So from that standpoint, there was so much to research and so much to consider.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you. Mary, did you have anything to add to the mix?
I don't feel I'm very qualified to speak about the history and heritage of the Asian Center, because I graduated in 2019, before the COVID. But what really impressed me is I found out about the Asian Center when I was a student there. I always remember this lovely lady who is waiting for us in heaven, Tina. I remember she was always the one active, laying out the meals, the food, for all to enjoy, not just Asian students, right? And I was so impressed. But more so, I was impressed with, wow, there's an Asian Center, there's support to immigrant church, right? So that was significant, because now I become an associate minister to the Chinese church. It was started as an immigrant church. Where else can we draw the support? And the reason there was not many Chinese students at Knox, and obviously we didn't have a large influx of students entering Knox, right, as the Koreans. But I think our need, right, our developer need are common, because, there's an intergeneration gap between those like us that have the faith, and those that grew up here that don't necessarily need to worship in our own native language. And sometimes they identify themselves more as Canadians, right? But I don't think it takes away the fact that Asian immigrant church, or any immigrant church, not just Asian, they need support to help with that transition. So I hope our outlook in the future would not just only focus on Asians.
Appreciate that, Mary, for sure. And it's a common experience, I think. I just finished reading Dr. Stuart McDonald's new book on the history of the Presbyterian Church in Canada from just after the Second World War till about 1985. And he speaks about this sort of boom we had of growth in the church, in the Presbyterian Church in Canada church. And I wonder or suspect that part of that boom was just the fact that there was, in a way, a wave of immigration of folks from Britain, Scottish, English, Irish sort of immigration that created a boom, and they had kids, and so things were bursting for a while. But that passing on to the next generation didn't happen in the same way. And so while there was this tremendous growth during the 60s or during the 50s and 60s, near the late 60s, now the Presbyterian Church starts to experience that decline that we've experienced all the way through. And that has had a generational impact. So I certainly hear that call from within the immigrant community, within the Asian immigrant community. How do we continue to pass on the faith to our next generation and the next generation and the next generation? It's a common concern for sure. I wonder if any of you have some highlights of the center's history over the last 30 years. What stands out as a memory? Mary, you've shared a couple of things of more recent memory. I wonder if others have some real highlights of some things that happened over the last 30 years that you're like, wow, that was such a great day or a great event or a great meaningful experience we shared together.
As a chair, and we center used to host crossing cultures together. We did that about 10 times with PCC Justice Ministry when Stephen Allen was around, and now is the lady, I forgot her, Catherine, yes. So, and it was held at cafeteria upstairs, Knox College. So that was really highlight. And when I look back, that is the most cherishable kind of memory to me. And not only that the content, how to, view ourselves, how to relate to other cultures, things like that. Not only that, but the whole gathering, more European members join, more than even Asian background. So the PCC as the whole denomination, they really wanted to embrace and understand the struggles of Asian small churches, and they want to be there to support. That was really impressive. So I wanna share that. And so every year, at least once a year, we did that, and every time it was a really good success.
I second Sujin on that. Crossing cultures, and it was interesting because I think through being on the committee to prepare for the Crossing Cultures events, I actually got to know Sujin better. Although we were both on the Asian Council, but relatively large, it was quite formal. But in these committee meetings, we plan and prepare together. And what was significant, I found, was that in Crossing Cultures, we not only looked into the issues of the migrants or the new settler, but we also looked into issues of reconciliation. For example, we certainly had a very successful event that had to do with the First Nations. And we also included the theologies, the Christian theologies, and the Christian practices that were in the First Nations churches, and among our different Asian churches, because, the Korean church is actually quite different from the Chinese church, and also quite different from the Filipino church and the others. So these sort of events really highlighted the value of the Asian Canadian Center. I think the other one was the sharing of research findings. For instance, about the struggles of the second generation or the younger generation Asian Christian, or those from Christian families, and why they struggled with holding on to their faith or growing their faith. And part of the struggle was not just spiritual. Part of the struggle was also intergenerational communication, intergenerational culture. As Mary says, many of our children identify themselves really as Canadian rather than Chinese Canadian or Korean Canadian or something like that. So those two for me were highlights. But I think the third highlight really, as Mary had said, was the huge generosity of various members of the Asian Council in showing hospitality through food and through welcome. And that really bridged, that was a wonderful bridge to many people, many students, and that I think also lends a crossing culture. I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, hospitality is always a meaningful thing, especially for students, but especially for communities, how we gather around tables together and for rich conversation and meaningful time together, for sure. Mary or Dong Ha, did you have anything to add around highlights?
Sure. Sujin and Irene have spoken well of some of the key events. I just want to add or dovetail onto that. But for me, one of the highlights was the recent research endeavor, which culminated in the publication of a book called People of Faith, People of Chung, the Asian Canadian Churches of Today for Tomorrow. And so that book publication aside was a culmination of years of leadership research under Professor Nansen Song. And we've had various presentations and community forums as such, but it was the first time that we were able to put it in a singular form to be made readily available. I still have several copies available, and I'll have to share that with you if I haven't, John. And at the same time, that project came to be, or was fruition of a Louisville Institute grant, which obviously acknowledged its importance for the Asian Canadian immigrant churches, its role, its challenges, its contributions within the Canadian context, of course. And so I think quite an involved process that everybody here were, involved in, and myself included. And I think it addresses a lot, in part, not just a cultural component, but like so many of our congregations, the generational challenges, inspirations, and hopes that as seen through the Asian Canadian immigrant churches in this context. But obviously, the issue is far reaching than that. So I think that was one of the highlights, at least for me, and for sure for others as well. On a lighter note, what's one of the highlights I have to say is, I think the Asian Center introduced kimchi into the Knox College culture, or TST culture, well before nowadays it's a health drive, and you see this in Costco or wherever, little plastic bottles of kimchi being available because it's supposed to be good for the gut. But you know what? We introduced this back in the 90s and continue to do so in the many suppers and lunches we have, along with other Chinese and Taiwanese cuisines. And I think on TST, we were kind of known to host fabulous Asian cuisines, not just on Asian Center hosted events, but I think on those occasions when Knox College had weekly lunches in the dining hall, Asian Center every now and then hosted, community-wide lunches back then, and it was widely sought after events. So introduction of kimchi, I think was an important thing. A little on a lighter note, perhaps, but
I love that, Dong-ha. I love that. Absolutely. Love some kimchi. It's good times. I want to just maybe add one from Dr. Stephanie Ling, who provided our reflection. She speaks about the musical celebrations that often happen, the concerts that included choirs and dance and drama and drum groups from the Mandarin, Korean, Taiwanese, Formosan, Chinese, and the York University Gospel Choir, along with some Knox College and some other community church choirs. She says those were amazing kind of events that were held over a couple of decades that would happen. So I just wanted to get that in as one of the highlights as well. Mary, I remember I've only been at Knox for a couple of years in the role that I serve at the college, and I was privileged to be at one of the events that the Asian Center had held. And I believe you were one of the panelists in a discussion on that day. Any highlight for you? Or I found that a very meaningful day for myself as well.
I felt honored to have a chance to really, share, right? From my viewpoint, personal viewpoint, how I experienced and how, in participating in leadership forum, how can I contribute that we can make it a stronger community through that. So, I can only leave it as such. I wish I had, say, 20 years involvement and I could quote on that, right? But every minute that I appreciate as a student, I was just fascinated. There was an Asian Center in Knox College. That's one thing. That's why I had a chance to read, right? And catch up with the history, and how they had contributed to immigrant churches. And I hope we can continue to do that.
So we've talked about some highlights, but what about, has there been some challenges, would you say, over the past decades or even presently? Or are there challenges that the center is facing or has faced in the past? Or
I'm speaking from a lay standpoint, because I'm one of the lay members of our Asian Council. Although I am a teacher of the Bible and I have my master's in Asian in theology and theological studies and so on. But one of there were several challenges over the years that we can see. First of all, that there has been a need to ensure that sufficient numbers of our ministers in Asian churches are strongly educated in the Word. What does the Bible teach? What has happened in history? What can we learn from what God has done in church history or in missional history? What has, and so on. So that has been a big thing. But the challenge, in terms of challenges, I think first of all, sometimes it's difficult for an organization or institution like Knox College to be sufficiently cross-cultural in the curriculum and in the delivery of the curriculum that is being taught, because it is still by and large a Western institution, whereas God has seen it fit for the Asian churches and the Asian church in general to have really blossomed, and from which there are many perspectives. So that's one challenge. I think the other challenge are in terms of the tenets of the Christian faith. How do we interpret certain principles and values that should be considered immovable? But in the recent years, the Western Church has interpreted many things as being movable items. And there have been clashes in which, for example, we actually lost an Asian Council member because he held very strongly to a particular principle that even some of the professors of Knox College rejected. It was a principle that was held very strongly in the past. But in the recent decade, it has basically been considered optional. So this is one challenge, the challenge of Asian churches holding much more conservatively to what is considered biblical. And the Western Church, not so much. So that's one challenge. I think the other challenge that has been met well has been that Knox College understood that there is a great need for pastoral care. And so therefore the introduction of a master's in pastoral care. And that has proved to be hugely successful, because when we speak of the transitions faced by young people in, cross-culturally, and also even Caucasian Canadians face issues that socially are too difficult. And so therefore, the introduction of the Masters in Pastoral Care and Counseling has been a huge success. So we have the challenges, and then we have some of the positive responses.
I can only speak from my kind of reality or situation. So, for example, Presbytery of Eastern Hanka we used to have 23, 24 churches. But because of COVID and the GA decision of human sexuality, now we have 14. Some left, some closed. So at the same time, we don't have that many Korean background, not MD students. Under our care, Presbyterian care, we have only one right now, but there'll be more. They're coming. So in total, there'll be 4 people are saying to me. I'm the clerk of the Eastern Hanka, but anyway. So in my opinion and understanding, that those 2 areas, Korean churches, immigrant churches are struggling. And not only that, Korea, the country in Far East, beside Japan, they are doing well economically and politically and militarily. So a lot of immigrants who came to Canada in 1990s or 80s or even 2000, our church members, especially, they went back to Korea to live in Korea. You know what I'm saying? So it's all kinds of stuff happening. So it's a really challenging, as a minister, as someone to take care of churches, under the Eastern Hanka. It's a really challenging time, but all we can do is just look up to God, right? A broken self, just as we are, just look up to God and seek God's help.
So I think Sujin and Irina pointed one thing out, that is, one of the earlier visions of the center was a drive to provide through the Asian Center at the college, if I can say this, a safe place for dialogue in terms of cultural importance, innuendos, and cultural diversity, inclusivity, intergenerational issues, and all those things. And I think, especially in recent years, with a lot of social changes happening throughout our culture, it wasn't easy for the Asian Center to navigate itself throughout all of that, given where we are as a society, as a denomination, as a college, and so forth. So I think, I don't think I'd be truthful if I didn't say that they're having some challenges in that regard, but it's work in progress as we speak. And the other thing is over the almost 3 decades, Asian Center has flourished on being a physical presence at the college, where in part it served as a drop-in center where, being readily visible on the main floor. So guests, friends, students, faculty alike, it was a drop-in center in which they could engage, encounter, discover the Asian culture and its theology through both, the assistants, the directors, and so forth. Now, we all know COVID has thrown a monkey wrench into all of that, and the structure and definition of classes have changed a lot since COVID, with a lot of online and restructured format of teaching. So the sense of community has changed in that sense. And so I think it's never the same as it was, and maybe things shouldn't be that way. So I think that's one of the challenges that we're working through, that, we don't have the student population or the, other staff available to present the Asian Center in the manner that we did once upon a time, a decade ago or whatever. So I think that's another physical challenge, but but it's something, again, work in progress as we address other issues that we move forward.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that I think from having returned to the college in the role that I have, I hear a lot about different, specifically say theological colleges that are really struggling with what community looks like in a post-COVID reality. It's I can reminisce with Dong Ha about 30 years ago at the college. There was this, you started the program, an MDiv program, with a cohort of people. There was probably about 20 of us in my class, and 20 in the next class, and 20 in the other. It was a large cohort of people, and we would go to chapel together. There was 3 different times throughout the week that you could participate in worship experiences. There was a variety of different ways of connecting and being community lunches, the dining hall. Lots of people reflect nostalgically on that prior to the college being sold and the big changes that came as a result of that. But even just the sense of community, and I think we're seeing this in our churches as well, just that sense of community post-COVID, of, more online communities, which create a different kind of community and a meaningful one, absolutely, but also, where are those times to be together and maybe even generationally. I have a couple of, they're not kids. I have a couple of children who are in their 20s, and, the sense of community is different now. It's not, the connectivity isn't the same way in the way it was, from maybe a generation ago. And so I think we're all struggling with that kind of challenge of how we meet the challenge of being together, of fostering community and what that means. And the way place has a significant role, place and space. So I'm sensing from the conversation that the meaningfulness of Knox College setting aside a space where the Asian Center would be present, and that being, like you said, Dong Ha, a safe space for people to come, and something that drew them to that space, and individuals who are working there, or professors, or whatever that might have looked like, created a sense of a touch point for community, an oasis for community in the context of the college. And much of that has changed, even just around how office space works in the college and the student body as well. Yeah, really, really, really interesting. What does the future look like, friends, for the center? You don't have to predict the future of the world, just specifically the center. What does the future look like for the center? What's on the agenda?
Well, I think that Dong Ha is and our we have a task force looking into the Constitution and all that. I'm certainly working hard on that area, but the future is, I would like to use a better word, but I can't, except for the sovereignty of God. The future could be precarious, and I say that simply because the future of Knox College itself, apart from the grace of God, would be precarious. And I say that, for example, that in the past and from the very beginning, the institution stood for the training for priests, people entering ordination and people being ready to lead various churches. And the great crisis is that the nature of church itself is changing so dramatically. And therefore, the purpose of Knox College itself is called into question. Why and for what and for what main relevance to the Christian community or the community at large does Knox College exist? And so for the Asian Canadian Center for Theology and Ministry, that question is even more urgent in as far as the very nature of Asian culture is very pragmatic and not so philosophical. And so if we are to attract the next generation to study things of theology and spirituality, it has to be so clearly something that can be applied to life and answer the questions of our younger generation. And their questions are, actually, I find that the younger generation has a very deep conscience. They want to know how the wrongs, the ignorant wrongs of residential schools will not be repeated. They want to know how our society can be more cross-culturally inclusive, and so on and so forth. And I think, and I'm hoping, but it is a struggle, it is a challenge, that unless Knox College gives space to an institution like the Center of Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry, unless Knox College gives space so that we can voice out and provide a helpful influence to the change of direction or the change of nature of our programs being offered, then I think that it's difficult for the decline not to continue.
Yeah, those are powerful messages, for sure. And I wouldn't just include Knox College, I'd include the Presbyterian Church in Canada and even Christian church in general, just to, what we're facing, certainly around the purpose of the college being for the training up of ministers, ordained ministers. This is a reality that's happening across North America, where MDiv programs are not being subscribed to as much as they used to. And so definitely the changing landscape. And I have the opportunity to go and visit lots of different churches, and sometimes churches that have very older demographic. That's all that's really there now. They'll say to me, how come there aren't more ministers at Knox College? And I'll say, well, like graduating as MDivs. And I'll say, well, respectfully, look at your congregation right now. If there's no young people in the church, how are we even going to have a chance to get some folks that might come? Maybe some second careers. But yeah, these are challenges for Christian church as a whole, for sure. Any other sort of thoughts around the future of the center? And
the Asian Center has always been looked upon as a bridge between cultures and theological faith. So my hope is that the Asian Center obviously continues in that role, because as we know, there are topics and areas that often don't get traction if discussed within churches or church courts. We usually end up getting derailed into, very strict, derailed into sides, right or wrong, and doesn't get anywhere, through policies and so forth. I think on that role, if the Asian Center, vis-a-vis Knox College, could continue and grow in providing a think tank like purpose, that this is where a lot of these avant-garde discussions and topics could be explored, and everyone feels that it's a safe place with legitimate resources and input, that people can have respectful discussions at it. A safe space, really, for these discussions to take place. It's neutral, but very supportive and exploratory. I think that's the kind of role that we hope to grow into. And there are certainly enough issues that are available. Crossing cultures, which Sojin mentioned, does that. And the reason why we got the Justice Ministry of the Presbyterian Church involved was we have their input on relevant issues, like the indigenous issues, because we being from Asian Canadian immigrant churches, it's a fact of the matter that, a lot of the newcomers don't know the history of the indigenous issue that's rest of Canada is embroiled in. And it's quite often, well, I wasn't there, or my generation wasn't there, type of thing. But how it impacts even the newer immigrants, well, guess what? The Asian Center, Knox College, was a suitable forum to address something of that nature. And we hope that can continue, certainly, but grow in ways so that the Asian Canadian immigrant churches, as it stands, and as a result of many of the things that had happened within our society, culture, that it could be seen upon as a safe and constructive arena in which to discuss this and address it with the college's support, of course. And so I think that's a big plus moving forward. That we need to keep, sacrosanct is not the right word, but it's an important component of what the Asian Center does. So, strengthening that bridge, making it wider so that, it does become a think tank or avant-garde issue for us to try.
I have seen the future. Of course, this is my personal experience and perspective. We have done well to be established as an Asian Center, right? Geared towards, the influx of Asian students in the past 30 years. But the landscape has changed. Now, the only thing that didn't change was the existence of the immigrant church and the lay and pastor, right, that is serving. And they all have in common, and I'm not touching Asian, right? They could be Polish, right? Whatever. And they have so much in common in terms of challenges. And I would think they would welcome a dialogue that, I didn't realize the Chinese church is experiencing that. How did you handle it, right? That is knowledge. That is wealth we can share among the leaders, right, of the immigrant churches. So, I know it's kind of daring, right? And I asked Don, how can I raise it? And he said, go ahead. You're welcome to cut it off. You don't feel comfortable with the conversation. But all I'm saying is, let's be a global center, a multicultural center geared specifically for immigrant churches. Because we knew that immigrant church is in a phase of what? Phasing out. It's not going to have new immigrant churches. But they are still leaders, right? Their pastor, they're serving there. And they felt kind of, wow, I'm stuck. I need help, right? Whom they can go for help. So that's one perspective. And the second perspective I want to mention is the second generation. Those children and grandchildren from this immigrant church. If you say, do you appreciate your culture in your worship? You know what they said? I don't care. I'm Canadian. I want to worship God. And this is how the Bible teach me. I want to be Christ-centered, right? But yet, since I am a minister in a Cantonese congregation, guess what? They don't, really any English-speaking guest speakers, because I couldn't somehow feel that maybe they want to hold on to the culture, right? That's why I say we've gone through a lot of conversations, changing the name. We call ourselves Cornerstone, which is an awesome, right? Major step that I think God opened our eyes to see. But for the second generation, first, they may not even stay in the same church. But those that came, they didn't say, I came because it's a Chinese church. They may notice the sign, but they say, is this a welcoming church? So there is the leaders, and there is the people that we want to reach out, young people, right? I can't help thinking about those days, when the Jews, they say, we want to stay very Jewish traditional, right? What happened? Right? So we can learn from history, and it can learn from each other. That's what I want to share.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah. I wonder if that's a good segue for as we're sort of wrapping up, just thinking about the ways Sujin has mentioned some things, and Irene has mentioned some things, and Mary, of course, and you as well, Dong-ha, but just the ways in which you can support these ministry leaders that are out there serving immigrant churches or Asian immigrant churches. Are there ways, can you tell us a little more about the ways in which the center has been that place, maybe in the past, or continues to be that place where people can get some support if they're in leadership, whether it's clergy or lay? And maybe if there's anything coming up for our audience to hear about as well that you might be hosting or working on.
I do think that the forums that were held, like, for example, the forums that we held to share, in which Mary was one of the panel speakers, to share about the findings of research concerning the second generation, and also concerning the transition nature that is happening in the migrant churches in the area of leadership. And I think that many of the church ministry leaders felt that such a forum was relevant to them. So that was very well subscribed event. And people came because they wanted to hear, they could identify with that. They wanted to have an exchange of experiences. They hoped to find some solutions or ideas for their own ministries. So I think that such forums are something that we can certainly do more of in the future. And also, of course, crossing cultures was always very well subscribed because it was seen as very relevant. And to that point, I think that if the center were given more space for listening space to impact the direction of Knox College in general, then there is a possibility that our programs, our courses, are not simply for ordained ministry. Because in the past with MDiv, the focus has been preparation of ministers in ordained ministry. Whereas these days in churches, whether they remain in the Presbyterian church or not, many leaders are not ordained, but they need desperately to be well educated to minister to their congregations. And there are so many areas in which, we need to sort of include. And like Mary said, the issue of what do you do with second generation? How do you minister to them? How do you attract them? What are their issues? The issue of migration. What are the challenges faced by new migrants? How does the church help? I think of the book of Acts and all the sort of rich experiences from that our Asian churches can share with other ethnicities. So I think these are some of the directions that I certainly see as being valuable.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And certainly the Presbyterian Church in Canada and Knox College itself, through its investment in the Center for Lifelong Learning, are identifying as well this shift in not having as many ordained ministers either to draw from or to nurture, and seeing that there needs to be more resources or more support for lay-led ministries in the church today. And we're seeing that in a variety of different denominations as well. Sujin, did you want to offer something as well, I think?
Yeah, just while listening to our friends, got me thinking that we always host something at Knox. We are just hosting and inviting and waiting for them to come. But why don't we go out? That just came to my mind today while I was listening to them. Doa and myself and Mary, we are all ordained minister. We have our own posts. So it is hard for us to really go out, but periodically or give some kind of a schedule or even like a Chinese Chinese church, Taiwanese church, some association. We visit them one day or one night and share our vision, who we are, and if there's any, we we did not do that as a collective body. We just assume that, oh, West Chang will go to certain area and do something. Oh, Donga will, or me, Mary will do in Cantonese speaking. So it hasn't, to me, it's like, yeah, we are trying our best, but, we need to change our paradigm, the way we do things, right?
Yes.
It's a new era, right? We need new wine skin, and we need to put new wine into new wine skin. Otherwise, we cannot repeat the past. Then God, oh my goodness, God, what is it that you want me to do? You want us to do, really? So just something that I want to share.
I think there's a sense of when you mark an anniversary, a significant one, there is that sense of, do we return to the nostalgic past, or do we think and seek and discern God's desire, God's purpose for us into the future? And that new wineskin, in new wine and new wineskin is a great image for that. Yeah, lots to think about for that. Dong Ha, did you have some other thoughts?
Yeah. Before I forget, on Friday, November the 7th is when we're having a little get together to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Asian Center at Knox College, room 4, 10 to 12. Not long, and then we will have some old friends, founders of the center, Professor Song, and others come and share their thoughts. And have a rep from Emmanuel College, I believe, who once had, they have an Asian center, something equivalent right now, but they've undergone some changes for them to share and so forth. And to give thanks to God, and certainly amidst all the things that we do, it's not an official forum of discussions per se, but I think there needs to be a time for us to celebrate the milestone, and that's what it'll be, with some luncheon provided. That aside, what I wish to say is, as we look towards the future, no, I mean, we can't go back to the way things have been. But what we do know is education for lay leaders, for example, things of that nature, have been popular in the past, and we've done that. Obviously, it's not an exact same thing, but be it off campus, as is popular these days. It's not easiest to come downtown Toronto, we realize. But, in terms of other opportunities for us to visit and go there, so to speak, as opposed to waiting for people to come here, I think there could be a lot of opportunities for that. And, as you're part of the ministry forum, lifelong education, where we have a number of recent doctoral graduates, people from Asian heritage who have gone through Knox College and TST. And these are invaluable resources who I know are quite capable of infusing Asian communities, current leaders, ordained and lay, of cutting-edge theology and ministry topics. So who knows where that could lead in terms of possibilities. But what I really hope is that Knox College, and certainly the Lifelong Learning Center, keep at hand the importance of culture in terms of theological education. That culture and faith have been so infused over all across the world. I mean, you really can't do without the other. There is the faith, of course, the common faith we share, but culture has often served as the medium to carry that forward in a meaningful way within respective regions. We carry a lot of that with us, regardless of where we go. So it's very important in which we address our theological education and training, and just being Christians per se. in light of culture. So I just pray that that's something that the college and certainly the Lifelong Learning Center could keep in mind as we go forward, and in partnership with us, of course.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Ministry Forum podcast. I hope you have a wonderful celebration on November the 7th, and I hope I look forward to seeing the ways in which the future unfolds for the center and for those in ministry across Canada, in the immigrant church, to shout out to Mary, and Asian immigrant churches as well. And I pray for, along with you as well. I think we pray for our churches. We pray for those in leadership in our churches as they face the challenges that are there, and also have those times of celebration and to mark milestones along the way, which is a beautiful thing that you're about to do in the coming week on November the 7th. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us today on the Ministry Forum podcast. We hope today's episode resonated with you and sparked your curiosity. Remember, you're not alone in your ministry journey. We're at the other end of some form of technology, and our team is committed to working hard to support your ministry every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell your friends, your family, and your colleagues. Tell someone. Please don't keep us a secret. And of course, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review in the places you listen to podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more ministry leaders just like you. And honestly, it reminds us that we're not alone either. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Ministry Forum on all of our channels. You can visit our website at ministryforum.ca for more resources, keeping up with upcoming events, and ways to connect with our growing community. Until next time, may God's strength and courage be yours in all that you do. May you be fearless, not reckless. And may you be well in body, mind, and spirit. And may you